Leprechaun Gold, written by Teresa Bateman and illustrated by Rosanne Litzinger. Donald ODell was a good-hearted man who could do a bit of anything if he put his hand to it. He took work where he found it and earned enough to keep food on the table and a roof over his head. He cared little for wealth and did not seek it. True, he lacked a wife and family. This caused him some sorrow, but there was time enough for starting a family in the future. Still, when he saw a wife give her husband a loving smile or a child grasp a father's hand, his heart felt an emptiness that the work could not fill. One day, as Donald was walking through a high meadow on his way home, he was startled to hear a cry for help. Hurrying toward the sound, he soon found himself by a fallen tree that bridged a bubbling stream. There, trapped in the water by the tree's branches, was a leprechaun. He must have been crossing the stream and slipped. Now the water slapped over the leprechaun's head, and between gasping for air and yelling for help, he was nearly spent. Donald ODell stepped out onto a key branch and snatched the leprechaun from the tree's grasp. The poor wee man was shivering and wheezing. Donald ODell shrugged out of his sweater and wrapped the leprechaun in its warm woolen folds. Then, tucking him under an arm, he hurried home. It was only a moment's work to kindle a fire and put the kettle on. Soon the leprechaun was sitting before the blaze, with his fingers curled around a steaming cup. "It's a kind-hearted man you are entirely, Donald ODell," the leprechaun declared, "and you'll find me properly grateful. The saving of a leprechaun's life means a gift of leprechaun gold." If he expected thanks, however, the leprechaun was sorely disappointed. "I've enough for me needs," Donald replied. "You can keep the gold for yourself." The leprechaun was dumbfounded. Never before had a man refused leprechaun gold. He pleaded with Donald ODell, cajoled him, debated the issue, and finally demanded that the man take the gold and be done with it. But Donald would not be swayed. Finally the leprechaun prepared to leave. "But be assured," he told Donald ODell, "you'll accept the gold, one way or another." The next morning Donald found a pot of gold on the doorstep. He shook his head, carried it to the nearest fairy mound, and left it there. That afternoon he reached for his coat, only to find the pockets weighed down with gold coins. He shrugged into the coat, walked to the fairy mound, and turned his pockets inside out. So it went for the next week. Donald found gold everywhere he turned, in his shoes, pots, wagon, even his breakfast porridge. The path to the fairy mound soon grew well worn. Then the day arrived when Donald ODell went from dawn to dusk without seeing a single gold coin, barring that which he rightfully earned rethatching a roof. "I expect the leprechaun is given up at last," he decided, feeling rather lonely. The next morning, however, Donald had other things to worry him. When he went to milk his cow Letty, he found the latch to the byre undone and the cow gone entirely, even though he was sure he had latched the barn door securely the evening before. There was nothing for it. He snatched a rope and took off, following the animal's tracks as they led through the woods and meadows, hills and hollows. Indeed, he spent the whole day following after the beast. Night swept in with the evening rain, and Donald could no longer see the cow's tracks. It looked like he would have to spend a damp night in the dark woods. He sighed and was about to settle under a tree when an unexpected breeze whipped a branch across his chest, turning him to one side. From this new angle he spied a light through the woods. Hurrying toward it, he soon saw that it was a window, lamplit and warm. He pounded on the door. When it was opened, his mouth dropped open as well. Standing in the doorway was a beautiful woman. She smiled warmly and, glancing at the rope in his hand, said, "I dunna suppose you might be the owner of that lovely cow that's wandered into me barn just a few hours ago." Dumbly, Donald nodded. The woman waved him inside. "It's cold you must be, and wet and worn out as well. Come away in and warm yourself by me fire. I'll feed you dinner, for your cow's already taken care of, and the two of you can spend the night in me barn." Delighted, Donald accepted her invitation. Over dinner, he discovered her name was Maureens, and she had lived there for several years tending her old granny. Now Maureens was alone. Donald's heart was touched, but he found it hard to hear her words over the sound of dripping water falling into various pots and pans scattered over the floor. "'Tis the strangest thing," Mary said. "The roof's been sound for years, with nary a problem, but this evening, for some reason, it began leaking horribly. I expect I'll have to find someone with the skill to retouch it for me, but I dinna ken how I'll afford it." "Ah," Donald O'Dell replied with a smile, "consider the job done, and paid in full as well for your hospitality, the fine meal, and the good company. I'll do the rethatching for you on the morrow, and gladly." Maureens smiled, and that was that. That night Donald O'Dell slept in the barn with Letty, and he was up at the crack of dawn fixing Maureen's roof. She hitched up her skirts and joined him. Oddly, the old thatch didn't look too bad. Still, by the time Donald O'Dell was finished, the only leak left was in his heart. He had taken entirely with Maureen. They courted for a month or two, and then were wed. Donald O'Dell was happier than he'd ever been before. "And not even Leprechaun Gold could have been better than this," he remarked to Maureen as they sat outside the cottage together. She hurried as the night grew cold, and Donald went to check the barn. "So, are you happy?" came a small voice. I am that," Donald replied upon discovering the leprechaun sitting on a railing in the byre. "But it's surprised I am to see you. I thought I defended your honour by my refusal of the gold." Leprechaun smiled. "And do you think cows wander free, and branches blow, and roofs leak without a wee bit of help? You've been paid in full, Donald O'Dell, for the saving of me life." Donald looked puzzled. "I've taken no gold from you," he insisted. "There is more than one kind of gold in this world," the leprechaun said, tipping his hat. "It's always I'll be then," he continued. "Give me best to your bride, Maureen. She's a woman with hair of gold and a heart to match." And with a wink and a laugh, the leprechaun was gone. "Oh, and if you made it this far, thank you so much for dealing with my horrible Irish accent. I certainly do love doing me voices, but sometimes they make me laugh. Ho ho, top of the morning and such."